gotten a commitment from Poroshenko they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
Well, just so...
Now, objective reality. Objective reality. Before we go to any notion of what this means, before we go into any notion of whether it's right, wrong, anything else, objective reality. What you just heard there was Joe Biden, when he was president of the United States, bragging about using $1 billion aid package to threaten a submissive Ukrainian government, fledgling, because it had just come through a coup or revolution, depending upon the side of the political spectrum that you find yourself. And he gets that government to fire a government official, meaning the government of the Ukraine deems a particular person to be necessary for that particular job, and the United States uses an aid package to bully and threaten a submissive Ukrainian government to fire the people, the person who the government of the Ukraine chose, meaning the people of that country chose for that particular job. That's amazing. Now, I think that's a big deal personally. The media don't care about that. Let's listen to it again. I don't want to mislead you in this. Joe Biden is bragging to a bunch of neocons at the Council of Foreign Relations. Listen to the stuff they're talking about. It's extraordinary. They're living in a different world. But he's bragging about firing the prosecutor, or bullying the government of the Ukraine to fire the prosecutor in the Ukraine that country chose to do that particular job. And he's saying either you get rid of him or you're not getting the money, the $1 billion that you need to keep your government ticking along. And he says, son of a bitch, they fired the guy. He's bragging, showing influence into the world. Let's hear him again.
Gotten a commitment from Poroshenko they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a...
Two things. One, this story is partially true. Joe Biden did threaten the prosecutor. I'm sorry, the president. The president did eventually get to the point of firing the prosecutor, just like Joe Biden wanted. It did not take place over 8 hours. Joe Biden is lying there in order for a political effect. It took place over apparently several months. But Joe Biden is right. He was able to successfully bully the president of Ukraine and use the $1 billion that they were going to give as an aid package to hold over his head to get them to fire somebody that the people of that country deemed to be necessary to do that particular job. The reason I'm relaying this, and I've done this story before, like almost a year ago, but the story is rearing its head today, because there's a story that is out. They say it's better to show a story as opposed to tell a story. And so before I go into the story that has pissed me off royally for some reason, and I know what it is, it's the hypocrisy of it that's annoying me. Before I show you the recent story that is out today, the big shit story that is out, that is a non-story from my standpoint, I need to give you the context. I want to show you the context to which I frame this and I look at this before giving you that particular story itself, and you can deem whether my context is correct or not. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content and you find yourself coming back often, please like, share, and subscribe. And of course, you can always support the PayPal patron. Before I start, I want to give a special shout out. Right now, all across the world, there are climate marches and strikes. Look at this. Hundreds of thousands of people are out in force.
zaczyna się zmiana i tylko tak dotrzymamy
Poland.
i pokażemy im, że młodzież nie zgadza się na zmiany klimatyczne i pokazujemy w ten sposób swoje niezadowolenie.
That's amazing. And this has been all over Germany, the United States. Right now in Richmond, there's one that's going on. There's another one that's going on in DC. This is all over. World united under one particular banner of we need to do something about climate. And it even seems to be moving the polling thing when you're looking at people in the polls and you're asking them questions about this. This is mainly Democrats more so. And I would even argue this has more to do with economics. If the person is at a particular economic level, they'll like, yes, we need to do something about climate because their own basic needs are kept. But nevertheless, it seems to be moving. And from the standpoint of these kids, they have to live in that world. Meaning the world that we tore or that we tear to hell is the world that they ultimately are going to have to inhabit. Shout out. Absolute shout out and solidarity on this front. You know, I get annoyed with mainstream media. Oftentimes, I don't really get to watch like CNN and those type of things because I read my media most of the time. But when I'm at the clinic or something, I get the chance to watch CNN, MSNBC. It's a warped way sometimes of looking at the world and the way that they go after stories. And taking this framing of objectivity, we are objective in the way that we do it. I've told you, objective is nonsense. And even when people try to take that framing, you should be very, very suspicious of people who take the framing that what they're using is objective. I may use the thing of rational man standing on the moon, and I use that perspective, and you could say, well, wait a minute, you're missing this, you're missing that. But I have a very particular political ideology. I don't claim anything otherwise. CNN, that's not true for them. Nor is it true for something like MSNBC. Fox News claimed to be fair and balanced, but everybody else knows at this point it's laughable. Oftentimes, the big media platforms are pumping this stuff out, and the elderly generation is watching this stuff. And even our channels aggregate around this stuff because it's considered mainstream. And I have to be honest, I get so aggravated with it because there's aspects of it that's true, but it's often lacking such context that's used to go after somebody in a way that's somewhat deceptive. I hate having to make an argument to some degree in a sense of rah-rah Trump, but it's not even a rah-rah Trump argument. It's an argument about hypocrisy and this notion of, well, if it's fair for one, how are you going to attack the other guy for doing the exact same thing, especially when you didn't say anything about the previous guy doing that. I want to show you this video again, because I don't want to lose the thread. Joe Biden talking to a bunch of neocons, telling them that he got the prosecutor in the Ukraine fired. Now, he did this by threatening them with $1 billion aid package, meaning it gets across to some degree the submissiveness of the Ukrainian government and desperation of the Ukrainian government to literally be in a position where the United States fires or gets them to fire somebody that the state itself decided that guy was necessary for the job.
Commitment from Poroshenko, they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here, and I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And
Joe Biden left something out in that. Joe Biden left a major, major piece out. What Joe Biden leaves out is Joe Biden's son is working at a company that prosecutor was investigating. Let me repeat that. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was working at a company that prosecutor was investigating. And Joe Biden's son was on the slate to be part of that investigation. Meaning, he would have been interrogated just like everybody else that would have been as part of a corruption scandal. Right here. So, let's flip. Joe Biden's 2020 Ukrainian nightmare closed probe is revived. All right, right here. But the Ukrainian officials tell me there was a crucial piece of information that Biden must have known but didn't mention to this audience. The prosecutor, he got fired, was leading a wide-ranging corruption probe into a natural gas firm, Burisma Holdings, that has employed Biden's younger son, Hunter, as a board member. U.S. banking records show Hunter Biden's America-based firm, Rosemont Seneca Partners, received regular transfers in one of its accounts, usually more than $166,000 a month for Burisma, from spring of 2014 through the fall of 2015, during a period where Vice President Biden was the main U.S. official dealing with Ukraine and the tense relations with Russia. The General's prosecution official file for Burisma probe shared with me by senior Ukrainian officials show prosecutors identified Hunter Biden, business partner Devon Archer, and the firm Rosemont Seneca as potential recipients of the money. When this prosecutor got fired, that case ended. And not just that case ended. It's interesting to know that Biden was put as front person for this, and then the firm put Biden's son as one of the lawyers on the case. Like, this is an astonishing level of corruption. I'm not going to go through the entirety of this, but I guess my point is, Biden's son is working for a firm that Joe Biden is a point person for the Ukraine. Biden's son is working for a firm. That firm is under investigation by a prosecutor in the Ukraine. Biden uses his political influence and hoses an aid package in order to get that prosecutor fired. When he's bragging about this to a bunch of neocons, he leaves out the fact that his son is working for the firm. His son is working for the firm that prosecutor is investigating. That's astonishing. Now, mainstream media doesn't touch the story. They don't touch the story. But think about what I've just told you. Joe Biden, in capacity as president or vice president of the United States, browbeats the prime minister of the Ukraine, holds an aid package over his head in order to force the prime minister to get rid of a prosecutor that was investigating a firm that Joe Biden's son worked for. What's wrong with that? A, it seems like there's a certain degree of personal gain. There's a certain degree of definitely conflict of interest. There's all sorts of qualms and problems with this. There's more. There's more. The Ukrainian embassy admitted, I think it was several months ago, I ran this story also, the Ukrainian embassy admitted that a DNC operative, a contractor, was working at that embassy trying to get information in order to attack Manafort and to attack Trump. And not just that, it goes further, because that particular person was trying to get the prime minister the president, to talk about Manafort, because they wanted to get enough political pressure to have Congress to be able to open up a congressional inquiry on Manafort during the election in order to attack Trump. Think about what I just said. A DNC contractor is working at a foreign embassy in order to get them. The DNC contractor is working at an embassy. It's in the United States, but working at the Ukrainian embassy to try to get information out on a political opponent. And to go so far as to try to get the president of that country to get into our political space to create a pressure for Congress in order to open up a congressional hearing essentially on one of the political opponents. The DNC is doing this. Here's a question. With a submissive Iranian government that we've already been able to demonstrate, seeing as the Ukrainian government fired the prosecutor who was investigating Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden has said that himself. And the DNC is actively trying to get information on Manafort. Here's another catch to this. Did you know that the Ukrainian courts found that the release of information by the Ukraine on Manafort was illegal? It was an illegal entry into U.S. politics. Now, a DNC contractor is working at the embassy and is actively trying to get information out on Manafort and is trying to get the president to say something about Manafort so a congressional hearing can be made. This is what the DNC policy wants. A submissive Ukrainian government that essentially fired its prosecutor that was looking into a corruption case in a company that Joe Biden's son worked for it gets across the submissiveness of the government. Is it possible that that Ukrainian government that was submissive to Biden and Obama in that very specific case just so happened to release information to hit Manafort, which was exactly the thing that the DNC wanted? Is there anything suspicious about that at all? Meaning, is it possible, and not even possible, is it likely that the Obama administration, who is under a Democratic administration, they are not unclear about the team to which they work for, knowing that Hillary Clinton was going to be running in the race against Donald Trump, understood what the DNC wanted in that case, and when it had conversations with the Ukrainian government, got across to them that we need you to do X, and that government did X and released that information, and the court system in that country said that was illegal. But is it not what the DNC wanted? And what the DNC wanted was exactly what they got. The release of information for Manafort to go after Manafort, somebody who could hit Trump. Ukrainian embassy confirms that the DNC contractor solicited dirt on Trump in 2016. And in answers to questions, Ambassador Valery Chelyev's office said DNC contractor Alexandria Chalupa sought information from the Ukrainian government on Paul Manafort's dealings inside the country in hopes of forcing the issue before Congress. Chalupa tried later to arrange for the Ukrainian president Petro Poroshenko to comment on Manafort's Russian ties on a U.S. visit during the 2016 campaign. The ambassador said, "This is the ambassador from the Ukraine. This is not a conjecture. This is a flat fact. Everything I'm telling you, media has never touched it. All of it's true." The embassy has got to know Chalupa because of her engagements with the Ukrainian and other Jesus Christ, why can't I say the word? Diasporas in Washington, D.C., and not in her DNC capacity. We learned about her DNC involvement later, Chalea said in a statement issued by the embassy. We were surprised to see that Alexandria's interest in Paul Manafort's case, it was her own cause. The embassy representatives unambiguously refused to get involved in any way, as we were convinced that this was strictly U.S. domestic matter, but they did get involved, meaning the Ukrainian government got involved. A fresh statement comes several months after the Ukrainian court ruled that the country's National Anti-Corruption Bureau, closely aligned with the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, and a parliamentary named Shirlia Lishchenko, wrongly interfered in the 2016 American presidential election by releasing documents related to Manafort. The acknowledgement by Kiev's embassy plus the newly released testimony suggests the Ukrainian efforts to influence the U.S. elections had some intersection with Washington as well. Now, for those of you who are Democrats and bristle at this, like, whoa, you're saying that the Democratic Party, through the Obama administration, was working to get information out on Manafort that would hurt the Trump campaign. That is exactly what I am saying, because that's exactly what you would expect them to do. Why wouldn't they do that? Hillary Clinton is running in a campaign against Donald Trump. You consider Donald Trump to be an existential threat, and the last thing you want is Trump to succeed you and to essentially demolish any legacy that you were going to have. Now, you're supposed to sit pat and not do anything. The guy that essentially had Bin Laden, what does it call it? I forget the name of it. But when they split the person's head open, while simultaneously giving jokes at a campaign rally. I think that was the one where he was deriding Trump. That guy doesn't have the capacity to play hard politics with the Ukrainian government to get them to do something, especially when they're closely aligned and the goal of it is to get information out on a particular candidate. You're telling me that you can't get them to do that? I don't believe that in the least. This agency that was closely aligned with our embassy, this embassy that was closely aligned with our embassy, and we just found a contractor in our embassy that was working at the behest of the DNC in order to get information out on Manafort. And it's just so happened that this bureau in the Ukraine released that information. Coincidence. Coincidence. Do you believe it's a coincidence? Do you believe that? Let's go further. Neil Orr, wife of senior U.S. Justice official Bruce Orr, acknowledged in congressional testimony that while working for the Clinton-hired research firm Fusion GPS, she researched Trump's and Manafort's ties in Russia and learned that the Lishchenko, the Ukrainian lawmaker, was providing dirt to Fusion GPS. Fusion also paid British intelligence operative Christopher Steele, whose anti-Trump dossier the FBI used for primary evidence, to support the request to spy on the Trump campaign via Carter Page. Yes, I'm sorry, this goes far deeper than this, but I hope you get my point and me trying to just give you a contextual view of the world. The Democratic Party was working with the Ukrainian government through our embassy, working through elements of their embassy or elements that was closely in line with our embassy to get information out on Manafort. That was literally what the Democratic Party wants. That is literally what the Democratic Party got. The government or the courts in the Ukraine ruled that there was illegal interference into our politics. Doesn't necessarily matter. The damage was done. They didn't get the congressional hearings on Manafort. No, I'm wrong. Did they? Did they? Well, Manafort got popped. So yes, they got what they wanted from the standpoint of congressional hearings. But the goal of all of this had been to hit the Trump administration, and all of it intersects with the Ukrainian government, and all of it intersects with the Democratic Party. And you have right here Joe Biden talking about essentially using the Ukrainian government in a submissive capacity. All right, that's my perspective of the world. That's the way I frame the world. So I see a story today, and I saw it brewing for a few days, that basically says the Trump administration was apparently talking to the Ukrainian government and trying to get the Ukrainian government to give them dirt on Joe Biden's son, Joe Biden. Hunter Biden. Now, apparently he pressured him multiple times within the context of that interview. A whistleblower heard it and was perturbed by this particular conversation. Think the worst. Think the worst. Think to yourself that, yes, Trump was holding over their head an aid package of billions of dollars in aid. And he was telling them, I want information on X. Now, that could be information because we're looking to do an investigation on X. That could be information to tar the political opponent. Think you're worse. Think for yourself and says, you know what? Let's say Trump just wanted the information on Joe Biden's son in order to hurt Joe Biden in this race. And to point back to what Joe Biden said, where he was essentially using that information to stop that prosecutor from attacking himself. And by the way, the prosecutor that Joe Biden said is a good, solid guy is also reopening this case because it's looking as if Joe Biden improperly, illegally interfered into the affairs of a sovereign nation. The guy Joe Biden said was a stern guy, essentially, is now reopening this case. My point is this. They are now going after Trump and saying a whistleblower said the president of the United States was pressuring the Ukrainian government to give him information on Joe Biden's son. And he pressured him multiple times. And the media is flipping out. And they put Rudy Giuliani, I don't know why they continuously put him on air, to say something that's a lie and get caught in the lie. And of course, after that happened, everybody's heads popped off. Oh my God, the president of the United States was threatening to withhold money if he didn't necessarily get information that he wanted on Joe Biden's son. So what? Think your worst. So what? Is it not at the president's discretion to do these things? Is it not at the president's discretion to have any particular conversation that he wants with various world leaders? It is not illegal. It may be an issue that may be somewhat unethical if you want to look at it in those terms. Let's look at it in Rudy Giuliani. Let's hear Giuliani for the moment. Let's watch this.
Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden.
No, actually, I didn't. I asked the Ukraine to investigate the allegations that there was interference in the election of 2016 by the Ukrainians for the benefit of Hillary Clinton, for which there already is a court finding.
You never asked anything about Hunter Biden. You never asked anything about Joe Biden.
The only thing I asked about Joe Biden is to get to the bottom of how it was that Lutsenko, who was appointed, dismissed the case against Antak.
So you did ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?
Of course I did.
You just said you didn't.
No, I didn't ask him to look into Joe Biden. I asked him to look into the allegations that related to my client, which tangentially involved Joe Biden in a massive bribery scheme.
Rudy.
Why is Cuomo, why does he understand that? It's clear as day. Now, This is why Cuomo doesn't understand it. It is impossible for Cuomo to understand it. Everything that I told you just now, everything that I told you leading up to this, or stories that I did over the course of the last year, everything that I have told you is absolutely flat, fact, perfectly true. Even if I maybe missed a slight detail or something like that, everything that I've told you for the most part contextually is true. Cuomo has never done that story. Cuomo has no idea what Rudy Giuliani is talking about here, even though everything Rudy Giuliani said here was absolutely flat fact true. And Cuomo is, for whatever reason, befuddled by this. I am looking into a matter where it looks like Joe Biden was sitting on the stage right here and said he threatened Ukraine that if he didn't fire the prosecutor, that they wouldn't get their money. That is it also possible that the reason that the information from Manafort was released was because somebody was getting something out of that particular deal also. And I don't think there's anything wrong in the world if you're looking at it and asking that particular question, considering Joe Biden is sitting here saying he threatened them with billions of dollars. You won't get your $1 billion if you don't fire that prosecutor that was looking at Joe Biden's son. I guess my point is, if Rudy Giuliani is looking into how that information from Manafort was released, why Biden's son wasn't, essentially, why Joe Biden was allowed to fire the prosecutor. And if Joe Biden is allowed to fire a prosecutor, Donald Trump is perfectly allowed to pressure Ukraine to get information on Joe Biden's son. I'm saying it goes both ways. You can't say that what Donald Trump is doing here, meaning the pressuring of Ukraine to get various informations, and whatever Rudy Giuliani is saying here, he's like, yes, I'm looking into a bribery scheme that allowed them to get information to hurt my client. Cuomo doesn't understand that. Rudy Giuliani says it again. I'm looking into a bribery scheme. I'm not necessarily looking to Joe Biden directly. I'm looking into a bribery scheme that relates to X. And Cuomo doesn't understand it. But fact of the matter is, if you're looking at the world to some degree in the way that I'm looking at the world, where all of this has taken place and everything that I've said here is true, Biden threatens Ukraine to fire the prosecutor. Just so happened a prosecutor that is looking into an investigation into a company Joe Biden's son works for. The Ukraine, particularly in the embassy, had a contractor working for the DNC trying to get information released on Manafort, and just so happened elements of the Ukrainian government released information on Manafort. So much so that the courts in Ukraine said it was illegal for them to do so. Now, fast forward to Rudy Giuliani looking into potential corruption going back to the 2016 election and the Ukrainian government. What he's saying here is legit. Cuomo is befuddled because Cuomo has never touched the story. I hope you understand my point.
Actually, I didn't. I asked the Ukraine to investigate the allegations that there was interference in the election of 2016 by the Ukrainians for the benefit of Hillary Clinton, for which there already is a
You
court
never asked
finding.
anything.
Oh! I fucking hate mainstream media. You heard what he said. I asked about interference in the election to hurt my client for Hillary Clinton. Here's the catch. Here's the catch. Cuomo may not know this, but right here. The fresh statement comes several months after the Ukrainian court ruled that the country's National Anti-Corruption Bureau, closely aligned with the U.S. Embassy in Kiev and the parliamentary named Sharia Lishenko, wrongly interfered in the 2016 election by releasing documents related to Manafort. What am I missing? Right? Whether you like or dislike Rudy Giuliani, what Rudy Giuliani said he was right. The Ukrainian courts have said that they interfered with the election. We know that there was a DNC contractor that was working at the embassy for the Ukraine, and we know that that embassy was closely aligned with elements in the Ukrainian government. What is he saying that's wrong? What am I missing? You don't have to like Giuliani. That's not really my point. Through my context of the world, what am I missing? Rudy Giuliani just gets here and says there was corruption between the DNC and the Ukrainian government that allowed them to release documents related to Manafort. That is true, co-stamped or stamped with the seal of approval by the Ukrainian courts. Cuomo ignores that outright, entirely ignores that. It doesn't matter to him. And by the way, I hate to again point out that Joe Biden just sat here and said he did the same thing. He did the same thing. Cuomo ignores it. Let's keep going. I don't mean to nail this.
Anything about Joe Biden?
The only thing I asked about Joe Biden is to get to the bottom of how it was that Lutsenko, who was appointed, dismissed the case against Antak.
So you did ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?
Of course I did.
You just said you didn't.
No, I didn't ask him to look into Joe Biden. I asked him to look into the allegations that related to my client, which tangentially involved Joe Biden in a massive bribery scheme.
Rudy.
Mainstream media is aggravating to me, honestly, because I get the dislike of Rudy Giuliani. I get how Rudy Giuliani is kind of, confused when he gets there and he gives these interviews, and they need to stop having Rudy Giuliani give these interviews because he usually ends up just admitting to it anyway. Meaning, in a case like this, I assume the worst. I assume that Donald Trump is not looking into this entirely because he wants to necessarily know about how all of this started. Why would this against them? And honestly, if I am Trump, I may want to know how they came after me. And I got to be honest, his supporters want him to do what he is doing here, meaning look into how on earth did a conspiracy theory get wrapped up in this way. And what it looks like is the Ukrainian government itself was involved in hurting Trump in the last campaign and boosting Clinton, especially through this notion of hitting Manafort. Why wouldn't he do that? Why wouldn't his supporters want him to do that? If what they claim and what I claim is that this is a conspiracy theory, and if everything I said in this video is absolutely true, meaning Giuliani has every right to make this claim and to look into this particular investigation. And now you guys' hair is on fire when I even point to a video that Joe Biden did the same thing. Joe Biden is browbeating the Ukrainian government to get them to fire one of the prosecutors. Why wouldn't you think that a submissive Ukrainian government, that a democratic administration has already shown a propensity to force capitulation, despite what a sovereign government wants, meaning it's not all that sovereign at all, that information on Manafort will be released when it just so happens to be the exact policy of the Democratic Party? Why is that insane? Rudy Giuliani might have been flummoxed in the way he was saying it, but he's not saying anything wrong. And even if this was as bad as they say it is, meaning I've seen some cases where they say Donald Trump was essentially threatening the prime minister to withhold aid unless they essentially gave him information on Biden's son. So what? He's the president of the United States. It is at his discretion to talk to world leaders and disclose what he wants to in a conversation with those world leaders. It is his job to some degree to interact with world leaders on this front. Nothing said here is illegal. You may take issue with the ethics, but the problem here is it seems that the Democratic Party, A, did the exact same thing to Trump in the last election and had no issue with browbeating the Ukraine into submission. Again, media doesn't know that or chooses not to know that. This is a class in propaganda. The media is turning around and screaming about a story when they didn't necessarily care about the story when the Obama administration was doing the exact same thing on two fronts. One, in the front of trying to shirk Trump by getting the Ukrainian government to work with him in order to attack Trump. I mean, whatever you want to think about the Russia conspiracy theory, the Ukrainian thing is flat, fact, true. Co-signed by the Ukrainian courts and co-signed by the Ukrainian embassy that says, yes, the DNC was working with us, and courts saying, yes, it was illegal intervention into democratic affairs or into our affairs. Russia stuff is propaganda, nonsense. My point is the media hollering about this in this particular way ignores everything that's taken place up to this point from the standpoint of Biden and from the Democratic Party. and to some degree gets across this notion that they are choosing what to scream about versus what not to scream about. Now, my argument is, of course, media is not objective. There is no such thing as objectivity in the standpoint of the thing that you're producing or presenting your view of the world. But they claim it. And in this case, another clear case, Cuomo being hit with something that is true by Giuliani ignoring it and goes to the next question. But you just ignored something that he said. Because look, if Trump is going after Biden's son, okay, first question, is there a reason that he's going after him? Yes. Did he do something potentially illegal? Meaning when Biden was in that office, did he do something potentially illegal? Yes or no? Now, I say that to say this. For Biden to come out and say they got a prosecutor fired, well, at the very least, that may not necessarily trespass on our laws, even though I think it may even trespass on our laws. It definitely trespasses on the laws of the Ukraine. I guess my point is there is nothing wrong with Trump looking into that. It gets dicey if he's doing this in a sense of directly to hit Biden. But the problem is the Democratic Party has just cleared this when they did the same thing in the last election. Oh, you understand what I'm saying? You can't holler about it and scream about it. Oh, I've been pricked. When you were caught doing the same thing in the last election. Crimea River. Yeah, Crimea River. I'll leave it here. I didn't want this one to be too long. I just had a lot of... I'm going to have to redo this video in part. Because apparently the sound was off. Look, my point is this. If the last president did the exact same thing, then you can't complain. Biden literally, and the Democratic Party literally did the exact same thing in the last election. Media had nothing to say about it. Nothing at all to say about it. Don't cry me a river at this point. Biden's Ukraine probe. What's the Ukraine probe? Biden getting the president to fire the prosecutor. The prosecutor that the state itself, the people of that state, selected. No issue. Media doesn't cover it. Nobody cares. The Ukrainian government is submissive. And Biden does this by withholding a grant of, I think it was $1 billion. Biden's son works at a company that prosecutor that Biden got fired was going to investigate. DNC contractor, while working at the Ukrainian embassy, is getting dirt on Manafort. The Ukrainian, or elements of the Ukrainian government, just so happens to release that dirt on Manafort, what the Ukrainian court said was illegal. Media doesn't cover it. Media doesn't care. This is being done entirely to hit Trump in 2016, meaning a party is working with the government of the Ukraine to shirk and subvert our election. Nobody cares. The media doesn't cover it. Rudy Giuliani gets on TV and says, yeah, we were investigating his son because we think that there was a conspiracy in order to shirk my client in the last race. That's true. Everything I've told you in this video is true. So Giuliani, what he said there was right. Cuomo ignores it and goes to the next question, pushing Giuliani to say it in a different way where he gets flummoxed. But nobody ever really asked the question, is what Giuliani saying was true or is there any merit to it? And I've just shown you there is. Don't take my word for it. Take the Ukrainian embassy or take the Ukrainian courts. All of which gave statements. The courts didn't give statements, but the courts gave a verdict. But the prosecutors in Ukraine gave statements. I'm just astonished by this story. Like there's a certain hubris associated with this where you just entirely ignore reality in order to push your narrative. And to do so on the major platforms to make it seem as if that's mainstream. As if mainstream is somehow tethered to reality. Well, it may be, somewhere near it. And yes, there may be something going on with this particular story. Nothing of merit because the president has all discretion in the world to do what the president is doing. It's a non-story. It's something that people can holler and scream about, but there's no there to the story, anything anywhere near as much as it was Russiagate. And yet they scream about it. And they ignore the fact that this took place in the prior administration and nobody gave two shits about it. When Giuliani brings it up, Cuomo has no idea what he's talking about. like, share, subscribe. It's aggravating. This I had other stories that I wanted to talk about, but this was the first story that aggravated me as I was looking through the story list. Thanks all. Like, share,